Okay. We are now live streaming on YouTube. Welcome. My name is Maria Cahill. I'm a supporter of Pacific Northwest Family Circle. I'm surrounded here by Zoom with okay, and this is exactly what I was worried about with the technical difficulties. So I'm going to turn my sound off. Okay. Yeah, I'm not a Zoom expert, and I've done this once, so I feel a lot of fear around how this is going to go, but I hope you'll just be patient with me. Pacific Northwest Family Circle is a group of families who've lost loved ones to police violence. Today, we're going to talk to you about the power grab of the federal government and what this means for protesters' First Amendment rights, voters in Multnomah County and everywhere, and what it means for families, what the implications are for getting justice for their loved ones. I'm sorry that Irene Kalanji isn't here to welcome you. She's one of the co-founders, and Shiloh Wilson Phelps is here, but because of the fires, yeah, Irene can't be here, and because of the fire, Shiloh can't be by video. So apologize for that, but we're going to start with a native land acknowledgement, and April is going to read that, and I'm going to just go off screen for a minute. April, you're on mute.
Is that better?
Yes, it is.
Okay. The Native Land Acknowledgement. We struggle for justice for Pacific Northwest Family Circle loved ones and all stolen lives murdered by police. We do this on the stolen land of Indigenous people, including the Multnomah, the Chinook, the Claskanai, the Puyallup, the Molalla, the Athleti, the Wasco, the Wishram, the Yakima, the Cowlitz, the Clackamas, the Cathlamet, and many more not named here. Indigenous people thrived on this land since time immemorial, before the arrival of colonizers. For 10,000 years, land currently called the United States sustained 50,000 generations of indigenous nations. The Pacific Northwest especially supported thriving civilizations. People spoke hundreds of languages, and many people managed these lands through history. It's likely that 25 million were killed and others enslaved in the genocide colonizers used to establish control over the land now called the United States. Later, indigenous populations were and continue to be controlled by forced sterilization. Despite this, thousands of indigenous people descended from local tribes and elsewhere continue to live on what is called Portland, Oregon. Nationally, they continue to experience the highest rate of police violence. Killing people to get and protect wealth is at least as old as the founding of the United States. When today's police kill loved ones, they are participating in a long arc of violence used by government to secure the safety and wealth of a handful of overprivileged people. May our understanding of the history of government-supported violence perpetuated on Indigenous people inform the struggle for justice against police violence. May we receive justice, may we serve and support the people on whose land we are either relatives, occupiers, or both.
Thanks, April. Now we're going to do a remembrance ceremony that we do at all our meetings and events. We'll say the names of the loved ones who were killed by police who have family members struggling for justice with Pacific Northwest Family Circle. I just want to say that this is a really small list of folks that have been killed by police in we've found over 380 in Oregon alone in the last 28 years. No one tracks this, so it's hard to know. But this is just a really small number of people who've been killed by police, and they have family members struggling for justice under the banner of Pacific Northwest Family Circle. So I'll say the name of a loved one, and then even though this is a Zoom event or a YouTube event, you're at home by yourself maybe, you can join us in saying, "We remember you," after each name. 19-year-old Christopher Kalanji, we remember you. 22-year-old Bodie Phelps, we remember you. 25-year-old Chance Thompson, we remember you. 17-year-old Quantis Hayes, or Moose Hayes, we remember you. 24-year-old Terrell Johnson, we remember you. 27-year-old Chase Hammer, we remember you. 21-year-old Bradley Morgan, we remember you. 27-year-old Daniel Isaac Covarrubias, we remember you. 29-year-old Alex Dold, we remember you. 49-year-old Captain Brian A. Babb, we remember you. 44-year-old Dino Case, we remember you. 54-year-old Remy Sabby, we remember you. 48-year-old John Elifritz, we remember you. 43-year-old Jesse Powell, we remember you. 27-year-old Patrick Kimmons, we remember you. 35-year-old Matthew Burrows, we remember you. 36-year-old Andre Gladden, we remember you. 20-year-old Giovanni Joseph McDade, we remember you. 29-year-old Joel Nelson, we remember you. 31-year-old TT Gully, we remember you. 16-year-old Brian Guy Dixon, we remember you. Wesley Allen Barbie, we remember you. 40-year-old Elibrio Eli Rodriguez, we remember you. There are 3 loved ones in the organization who were not killed by police. We call these attempted police murders. And we say, we support you after these 3 folks. Andre Thompson, we support you. Bryson Chaplin, we support you. Melvin Lewis Dillon, we support you. This is just so important to center the loved ones in all the work that we do. So I will just leave it at that. I'm gonna let folks go ahead and introduce themselves. We'll start with Stephanie Babb, and take it away.
Thanks, Maria. My name is Stephanie Babb, and I wanted to say, Patrick, Stacy, Kenny, we remember you. And they've just been recently added to this long list that we have. I'm in Eugene, Oregon, Lane County, and my brother was a captain in the Army, and he was killed by Eugene police. Is that what we need now, Maria, or are we going to go on to maybe April?
No, go ahead and give your spiel.
Oh, good. Okay, I can do that.
Okay, thanks.
So this is really good because this has been really important and kind of on my mind because I have made it to the protests, and when I get an opportunity to, I live stream. And so this is what we're doing this for. Portland is being used, I believe, as ground zero for testing federal jurisdiction superseding the district attorney's impact and power as chief prosecutor in the district they were elected in. If the federal government takes over prosecuting protesters and counter protesters, individual beliefs gets categorized as organizations, like being anti-fascist or even a patriot. It sets, hold on, I just printed this out. It sets precedents for them to classify arbitrary associations with terrorist affiliations. In turn, it enables the federal government to apprehend and suspend all constitutional rights to said individuals. No phone call, no representation, and to be held indefinitely with no charges. All for classifying a belief of misinterpreted terminology. We can't let that happen regardless of anyone's conflicting political beliefs. We need to keep it local, we need to keep it in state, and we need to keep voting. So I know I was given 4.5 minutes. I just wanted to make that point. The reason I'm including both sides, because we get into that that element of the terminology, and it can just be used against us. And it doesn't matter where we're coming from. And as soon as that happens, that can be used as a tool to continue to arrest us and prosecute us, but more importantly, to take away our constitutional rights. And that we can't have happen. It doesn't matter what side you come from, that can't happen. I think that's what I'm here to say.
Thank you,
So, Maria,
Stephanie.
thank you.
Next up, Simam Husseini from CARE Oregon.
Hey, greetings, everybody. Yes, my name is Simab Husseini, and I'm with the Council on American Islamic Relations as vice chair and co-founder. Pronouns he, him, his. And as far as an organization, you know, CARE Oregon has, we had joined pretty much the forefront of police accountability work with hugely invested, talented organizations and individuals, such as Pacific Northwest Family Circle. And since we started 3 years ago, our start was during the rise of hate crimes against Muslim communities, and which is the subject which we center ourselves with. But it's not just that, it's also reflective of the communities that are impacted by the same perpetrators of hate. Those same communities that were impacted that we've worked collaboratively with include, but aren't limited to, Black, Brown, Indigenous, Jewish, and faith communities, LGBTQIA, and differently abled people. So our first informal introduction to this whole thing was during the Max train stabbings. And at that very point, we discovered how racial bias and even what could be seen as racial animus existed within enforcement, particularly law enforcement, such as Portland Police Bureau, and how it played into the deaths of 2 heroes and almost mortally wounding a third. The target being 2 young Black girls, one with the hijab. The full story was immediate to us. Portland Police Bureau was intentionally ignoring the night before, when the Portland Police Bureau was, when they questioned a victim as a suspect the night before the Max train stabbings. And they would let this person walk away that night, who would wind up turning out to be the murderer of the Max train, of the victims of the Max train stabbings the next day. This was an initial insight as far as being able to really just kind of get a crash course as to how this this injustice is applied from a street level, and how it works its way up into this particular justice system. Shortly after all this, we had a fortunate tour given to us of the entire justice system and how it worked through the entire Multnomah County District Courts, all the way across the street to the federal building by a public defender named Chris O'Connor. And hate to kind of put him on blast there, but it was really fortunate to be able to walk through an entire justice system and see how these levels of courts and everything work, and what they call like the $5,000 benches, where when you see 4 or 5 cops sitting there, they're gathered. It's a total of that much overtime that they're likely going to take for that day. That's essentially was a very, very big eye opener for us within the first month. I would say even first 2 weeks of getting active as an organization back in 2017. I can go a little bit more if this is the 5 minutes we're going to work in.
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
Yes. So not 2 days later, after the Max train stabbings, a man stuck his finger out of a window of his vehicle as he was driving, fashioned it as a gun, and gestured shot after shot towards a minivan. This minivan had very obviously a Muslim woman sitting in the passenger seat. It was a Muslim family, actually. Husband driving, wife passenger seat, baby in the back. And this man began, gesturing, pointing and pulling a trigger of a gun with this finger gun of his, and gesturing like death with his fingers over his throat, trying to blocks, following these people, scaring them, trying to ram them off the road with his vehicle, swerving into them. And we were immediately notified of this within, I think, half an hour of this even happening. And we managed to, within 72 hours, identify the suspect, the vehicle, get witness testimonies, multiple witness testimonies, including his soon-to-be ex-wife. We had the whole case wrapped up within 72 hours and delivered to Portland Police Bureau. And it took almost 30 days for Portland Police to interview the victims, let alone detain the suspect. And again, trying to work this process through the district attorney's office, trying to get an investigative process going during these 25 days, and then threatening that we would go public. We would put out a press release for this inefficiency. And in about this being almost 30 days in, then they finally spoke to the family for the first time, the victims.
About 30 seconds.
Yeah, so with all this taking place, stepping into current day with everything we know since the murder of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Elijah McClain, we know that this culture of racism and within law enforcement is unified across the US. And this protest and movement for Black Lives Matter is unified because of it. So we find ourselves in a situation where we're dealing with an unknown now, having the DA not prosecute most of these protesters, and now having a state entity come in and file federal charges just to work around what DA Mike Schmidt has progressively done. So, we find ourselves and we ask folks that, based on this new territory, and we ask the folks that many of our friends in this legal field that they're navigating with total care and very little resources to the best that we can. We ask for folks' awareness, amplification, and support in calling out the city and state and its complicity in the sanctioned violence against its protesters, who are ironically being mildly subjected to the mortal violence that Black and Indigenous bodies have faced for centuries by a force that's been creating a minefield of protections against accountability.
Thanks, CMOB.
Thank you.
We appreciate your perspective. Next slide up, I'd like to invite Clay Aggerson, please.
Hi, my name's Clay Atkerson, he, him. I'm a member of Portland's Democratic Socialists of America, or DSA for short. I've been active in the protests the past 3 months and was recently arrested on Saturday night, or Night 100, as I like to call it, along with a few other members. So since the beginning, I've seen the evolution of the protests from the early Justice Center days to the federal occupation and to the recent actions we have now. The police response between all of them has not fundamentally changed at all. As of Saturday night, we saw still being used extreme amounts of tear gas in residential neighborhoods and mass arrests. I think it was probably one of the highest with 59. There have been various injunctions, and now the mayor is banning the use of tear gas by Portland Police Bureau. But every single time they've kind of skirted around it, either by bringing in federally deputized state troops or declaring riots for very little infractions. So they're able to use these weapons of terror against us. And already they've already had an announcement today that they're going to use more force in response to Ted Wheeler's banning of CS gas. This has led to a randomness in police response and charges. Some nights the police are typically hands off, but others are met with threats and immediate orders to disperse when you haven't even left the park yet. On Saturday night, my group was complying with orders to disperse when they charged at us, violently tackled us to the ground, and arrested us. One of my fellow members was bloodied, and he needed medical attention to his head. We all received different charges, and it seemed to be based on whatever agency was arresting us. You know, they had OSP, they had the sheriffs, they had Portland Police Bureau, and each of us just received different charges, and there wasn't any rhyme or reason to it. And that usually happens most nights. Most of the charges for all those arrests were those that DA already announced that they would not prosecute. This shows it's not about enforcing laws, but suppressing our voices, asking for their own accountability. It's a very traumatic experience to be arrested, even if your charges may not be pursued. Every night we go out, we have to prepare for the worst because there is no consistency to the response. I remember at the sheriff's office on 47th and Burnside it was a week ago. We're a couple hours in, it was very good energy. The police were mostly hands off. They haven't even really appeared at all. We just got done listening to an artist sing a song. It was a very nice time. And then out of nowhere, while we were slightly distracted, there was 20, 30 cops in riot gear rushed out and tried to grab anyone they could. Luckily, it was only one or two. Sadly, they still got a few people, but it just kind of shows if they could have done nothing. They could have just let it happen. There was no reason for them to rush out. I was already deciding I was going to head home. Some people were already starting to trickle out, but all it really did was anger us and energize us more to stay longer. The quote nightly violence would stop if they just didn't show up, because they're the perpetrators of it. This is just a drop compared to the violence and harassment done by law enforcement to our communities, especially to our BIPOC folk. And these officers must be held accountable in all situations. They can no longer own the streets, and we must make sure they don't act with impunity any longer.
Thanks, Clay. Thanks for being out there and for joining us tonight. Wish you the best with your charges. And hopefully through work that we're doing now and work that we'll do in the future on this, we can end this. I'd like to invite Mike German to come in.
Hi, thanks very much for having me. It's my privilege to speak to this group. My work at the Brennan Center for the past couple of years has focused on law enforcement response to far-right violence, or the lack of law enforcement response to far-right violence. And my latest report that just came out about a week and a half ago focused on racism, white supremacy, and far-right militancy within law enforcement. So this has been a persistent problem that I was aware of as an FBI agent. in the 1990s when I was working domestic terrorism investigations, looking into white supremacists, violent white supremacists and far-right militants. But it remains a problem, and yet there's no national strategy to address it. And of course, in looking into that, I've been paying quite a bit of attention to what has been going on in Portland, and to see this latest tactic that the federal government is using to override the local district attorney is highly problematic. We're seeing it elsewhere as well, particularly in Philadelphia and now in Rochester, New York. Also DC, of course, is a federal district, but we're seeing a more aggressive approach after protests to target protesters. From what I understand in Portland, most of the federal charges are still misdemeanors, which I want people to understand it's a rare thing for the federal government to charge misdemeanors. And I think that's one thing to keep in mind, that I think what they're trying to do is boost their numbers so that they can authenticate what the President Trump and Attorney General Barr has been saying about Antifa driving these protests rather than Black Lives Matter activists. But keep in mind that the federal courts are overburdened and probably will not be very happy with a U.S. attorney who's going to trial on misdemeanor cases. So the flip side to this problem of the federal government stepping in when the district attorney has dismissed charges is that it doubles the number of overseers. So obviously, the Portland City Council has been active on these cases, but now there's an opportunity to use the federal oversight mechanisms to try to get some accountability for these crimes. While we have the U.S. attorney charging protesters with misdemeanors, they're not charging police officers with civil rights violations. There are any number of different actors out there who are accounting for this police violence. So there's a lawyer in North Carolina named Greg Doucette, who's got a list of videotaped examples of unnecessary police violence during protests. So appealing to the U.S. attorney about why these cases aren't being charged, and now because these are federalized local police that are making these arrests, the U.S. Department of Justice Inspector General has oversight of that, and he's already doing an investigation of the U.S. Marshals involved in the protest violence earlier in Portland. So you can appeal to him. That's Attorney General or Inspector General Michael Horowitz, to expand that investigation to look at any violence perpetrated by any federalized law enforcement officers as well. And of course, the congressional overseers, including on the House Homeland Security Committee, House Judiciary Committee, and House Government Oversight Committee, have been looking at these issues. So there are ways to focus your attention to make sure there's accountability for these agencies that are trying to use the federal authorities to override local control. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Awesome, Michael. We're gonna hold off on questions until the end. Thank you so much. I'm gonna invite Madeline Carroll from DA for the People.
Thank you, Maria. Very happy to be here. This is an incredibly important issue, not just for Portland or for Oregon as a whole, because it really has implications statewide, but also for the country as a whole as well. Oregon DA for the People over the last couple of years has done a tremendous amount of work as a coalition of organizations, including Pacific Northwest Family Circle, to shape the conversation around what the role of the district attorney should be. And this is a conversation that's happening across the country and in a lot of communities. District attorneys are elected officials, and the public needs to have a say in how they do their jobs. here in Portland, in Multnomah County, in our last election, DA Mike Schmidt was elected by a vast majority. Over 75% of voters voted for him. And that was based on the fact that the community came together to talk about the issues, talk about the powers of the district attorney and how those powers can be used and abused, to talk about what we want the district attorney to do and be in our community. Mike Schmidt rose to the occasion and had a platform that was aligned with what the community was asking for, including holding police accountable and declining to prosecute offenses that are lower offenses that do not keep us safe by bringing those into prosecution, including nonviolent protesting offenses. So what's happening right now is after all the analysis that communities and organizations did to find where we had influence to hold police accountable and to change the criminal legal system locally so that we are not contributing to mass incarceration, as well as other issues, especially issues that acutely affect Black and Indigenous people and other people of color in our community. Now, when Mike Schmidt, our new DA, is following through on what he said he would do during the election, following the platform that he put forth, following what the community has asked him to do, his power is being usurped by the federal government when they, along with Kate Brown, who has gone along with this scheme, give Oregon State Police the power to bring federal charges and take that power away from local district attorneys. It's incredibly alarming, and it not only undermines the district attorney, but it undermines the electoral process. It means that we as voters have no way to hold our government accountable in how it treats people in our criminal legal system. And without any power to do that at all, it means that we're living in a perpetual state of state violence that we can't change no matter what. The focus on protesters and the right to protest is also incredibly important, because if we aren't given the ability to enact change through the electoral process, which is the process that we tried to use, one of the processes we tried to use, protest has also been one area, legal action, lots of different areas, but without allowing communities to change their criminal legal systems, their local systems through elections, and while also coming down hard on protests and making that avenue of public engagement also very difficult and dangerous. The government is taking away our ability to voice our concerns, to pressure those in power to make change happen that we want to happen. And that's something that isn't just about Portland. It isn't just about Oregon. It's about the whole country.
Thanks, Madeline. I'm going to invite everyone to go ahead and just put your videos back on. I will do the same. And we can all be here together on the recording. I'm just, these were, I hope now that you have a better understanding of why this is such an urgent issue, why this is such an important issue. I do want to apologize. Our co-founders were not able to make it tonight because of the fires here in Oregon. We're streaming from Portland, Oregon. And if you've seen the fire map, you would not be surprised. I'm sorry that more family members weren't able to speak on the importance of the DA, but the DA is the keeper of the justice that Pacific Northwest Family Circle families need to get the justice for their loved ones. So we're in an odd position where we've been struggling to move the power of the DA to the people, feeling like the DA has too much power. And now we're in an odd situation where we're trying to protect the power of the DA so that it can move to the people instead of up to the federal government where it does not belong. I want to just say that there are a couple of things that we plan on doing next, and I want to invite you to do those things. So if you want to email us, you can email us at info@pnwfamilycircle.org. Or you can go to our website, pnwfamilycircle.org, and find our contact information there. So one of the things that we're asking folks to do is please sign the Oregon DA for the People platform. As individuals, we can tell the government that this is important to us and that we support the community-led process and these community-led demands, and also that we support the power of the district attorney to determine whether these, to decline to prosecute and to do a lot of other things that are within the discretionary powers of the district attorney. So that's a real easy ask, and I'll email that out, but there's also a bit.ly for that. So if you're familiar with bit.lys, it's bit.ly/, and then all capital letters ORDASIGN, like ORDA, like sign the Oregon DA for the People platform, ORDA sign. So we are going to send the petition. There are over 550 signatures when I looked earlier this afternoon of individuals. There are 23 organizations that have signed on in support of our petition to Billy J. Williams, who is the U.S. Attorney of Oregon that needs to be stopped from taking the power from the local area. So we will send that off to him tomorrow. We'll be mailing that out. I have no email for him. This is like how mysterious this whole and inaccessible this whole process is. No one called me back to give me an email or help me at all. And I didn't tell them what I was doing. I just like, can I have the email? No one called back from a number of different offices. And there's, so we're going to mail that. I'm going to print it out and mail it to him. And we're trying to figure out the next target. So the next thing that we're going to do to stop this power grab. And Mike German had some great guidance for us. So I appreciate that. We are going to start an Amplify team to amplify the legislative priorities of Pacific Northwest Family Circle, because if we can't get justice for the loved ones, then we have to look in other areas. So to at least stem the tide of police violence, and families have put a lot of effort into our legislative priorities, and they've given their loved ones unwillingly for this cause and have a lot of lived experience and knowledge. And so yeah, we need to, the first priority is punishing police. So I'm going to open it up. I'm going to invite everybody to join us on video. And I want to just ask the family members if they have any additional thoughts that they want to add about this, or yeah. So the family members in attendance today are April Savvy, the wife of loved one Remy Savvy, Stephanie Babb, sister of loved one Captain Brian A. Babb, and Mary Barbie, who is the cousin of loved one Wesley Allen Barbie and the mother of loved one Melvin Lewis Dillon. I want to invite y'all to speak if you have anything that you want to add. Any thoughts?
I'll say something, Maria. I wanted to
We can't hear you, April.
Is this better?
Yeah, that's better. Yep.
Okay. I wanted to thank Clayton and Mike for coming tonight and taking the time out of their day to spend with us and to tell their story and to help us understand your perspective and what you're experiencing. I personally am not going to any of the protests. I'm absolutely afraid of the police. Even just getting pulled over, I'm just deathly afraid of what an officer might think and I might die. Just, you know, so I really appreciate your time, and I can't think of any questions for either of you right now, but if I do, I will filter them to Maria and go that way. But I just wanted to say thank you for your time and for listening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What about Mary? Am I on? I can see the little green box around me right there. But I can't hear you. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I want to second that. I want to really thank you guys for taking the time and being on here. This is the first time that we've done this in this kind of format, and it takes a little bit of time and trying to get the information out, because I know that all of us have such important things to say that I know people need to hear, especially in these times, and that you guys are on the front lines and you guys are doing the work that people like myself and I know other family members have a hard time doing because of what just April just said. We are affected so viscerally, and like Clay was saying, when you get arrested or you have things like that happen to you, it is so traumatic. And so when you have a family member that's killed, it affects you so much, and it never goes away. You're always associated with that. And Michael, the information you have is immense. I really want to hear what Mary has to say, but I just want to put out there. So I follow a lot of sites all over Oregon. I find that that's really important on both sides. And so when I say patriots and protesters, the only reason I'm doing that, because y'all know where I lay on that side, but there's been a lot of talk about arsons. And since I've personally had family members with their houses burned down and evacuated. And there's a lot of information out on the internet right now about Antifa starting these fires. And I want to say that there's absolutely, unequivocally, no confirmation. There's no proof. That is not happening. Okay. And that's erroneous information that I want to stop right here, right now. Just the fact that people would even put that out there is so upsetting to me. And that's why I'm addressing it. I want to say that it doesn't matter. Once you start a catastrophic fire that affects so many, you've now relinquished your privilege to associate yourself with any political belief. You are now just a fucking arsonist. So, and I have proof that there have been fires started near Ashland and Medford by people, not anybody associated with Black Lives Matter or Antifa or anything else. I know personally that the Black Unity, Black Lives Matter, the organizations here in Eugene have done an amazing job putting money together and cards and going to the Red Cross Center and helping these people that have to be evacuated. And my appreciation, that's where our activism comes in. It's not just protesting, it's really helping the community. And that's what I find is so important. And that's why when we show up to a platform like this and talk about what's really going on, this is what's important, is that we communicate this to everybody and everybody understands what's happening. So Sorry, get a little emotional, but
For any of this, no, you're good. I have a question for. Can you expand on why this?
Maria, your audio is hard to hear.
Oh, can you expand on why this narrative, this good protester, protester narrative, is so harmful for the movement and for the democracy? Could you hear me?
who are you talking to, me or?
Mike or
I
Clay?
thought it was, yeah.
Anyone though? Really?
So it's an old tactic when there's protests, particularly protests against police department, for the police leaders and the state and local government leaders to try to portray the protesters as outside agitators. And the reason is twofold. One, to disempower the protesters themselves, and the reason that they're coming out to protest, to suggest the reason these people are here isn't really because they're concerned about police violence and being unaccountable, but because these mysterious outsiders have provoked them to act. And so it's not just to discredit the movement, but also to give the police a wider berth to use violence against the protests, right? If people in the community that police are sworn to protect are protesting police violence and the police acknowledge that, it's hard to use violence against them. But if the police can convince the rank and file that this isn't the community you're sworn to protect, these are this outside force, however you want to frame it, it then gives the police license to use a higher degree of violence indiscriminately against those protesters. And of course, it's not surprising that that's the result that we see.
Anyone else want to comment on that question? Yeah, I thought that was a great answer too. Maybe family members could talk a little bit about what you think is the most effective way to end police violence. We've got our legislative priorities, right? We want to discipline police, but maybe we could expand on that.
Well, I'll just say that I hadn't intended on saying anything tonight, but since Stephanie put me on the spot, the legislative procedures, that's the one thing I think needs to be really pushed and focused on, because until we get an independent oversight committee to hold the police accountable for killing our loved ones, this is not going to change. Just today, another person's loved one was killed in Dallas by the police officers. Of course, they fired 4 of them, but that doesn't change the fact, that doesn't bring that young man back, you know? So I think that I don't know what to do, but what we're doing right now is to try to put forth the efforts in addressing these issues and pushing it to the legislators so that we can try and get some laws passed to hold them accountable and just totally abolish qualified immunity, because that's what they use as their scapegoat. They use that as the reason, that they fear for their lives. Excuse me, but that's bullshit. They're armed, and these people that they're killing they don't have any arms. And even if they did, they could shoot them in the leg and disable them. They don't have to do a kill shot. But from what I understand now, that's the way that they're trained to do. They're trained to kill, and that needs to change. And I think that's about all I have to say.
Thanks, Mary. That was great.
Yeah. And I want to just say right behind Mary that we got to do something about qualified immunity. I'm all in for trying to reduce, broaden or get rid of qualified immunity, change the law on that somehow, because there's just no accountability. There's no accountability on the part of police. I mean, they have carte blanche, and listening to these protesters, it really just freaks me out, because all those officers have to do is just say, "Oh, I feared for my life," and they could kill you. And oh well. I mean, just throw another body on the pile. I mean, they really don't care. They have dehumanized all of us. I mean, I don't understand. Police are sworn to serve and protect. And there are many police that think they're sworn to protect themselves, not the community. The lines have been too blurred, and they've lost sense of being human anymore. And like Mary says, they're trained to kill. And it's got to change. We've got to rise above the violence and be better. And changing the law seems to be the only effective way to do it right now in this climate. So, that's where I'm at. Whatever we can do to change the laws to get people to start listening.
Not only that, Stephanie, let me expand on that too. They use the excuses they feared for their lives, right? Well, yeah. It was just brought to my attention to let's use this phrase. If you fear for your life, let us help you. What can we do to make you less fearful of your life? And what is it that's causing you to be so afraid of that innocent individual that you're pointing that weapon at? What is in your character? Are you using steroid drugs? Or are you on amphetamine, something that's giving you that paranoid fixation in your mind that you have to fear from that person that you're killing right now, or that it's running away from you?
It's almost like a projection.
Yes. So what I mean, that's why qualified immunity needs to be either abolished or a different set of a code of their codes need to change. They're not on a war field. They're not in the military. They're civilians. These are civilians. What makes you think you have to be militarized to go in communities of civilians and act according to a military stance? You're not at war. This is not a war zone you're in. But when you go out, you create these. You're the reason. The police are the reason that these things escalate, because I've seen it. Peaceful protests, and as soon as the police come, they instigate, and then they use the fact that if you say something to them that they don't like, you're resisting arrest, and they become violent towards you. I don't get that.
Yeah. If I can even just compliment Mary, and including April, what April was saying, currently right now in the state of Oregon, we have in our legislature a joint committee on transparent policing and use of force. And they have 4 LCs that they're currently pushing.
Legislative concepts.
Yes, legislative concepts. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Regarding, what policing looks like, and that's the start, right? And one of them also being a legislative concept behind qualified immunity. Now, what's happening right now is that there isn't enough of us getting in and participating and amplifying and pushing the boundaries in which they're currently they're drafting. Right, we want more out of it, and what they are currently getting in mass is pushback against it, more of it, and it's almost it's what happens is that there's folks out here who, the reason why we're sitting and living within laws and structures that actually protect police more and more as time goes by, and these structures are continually being built to protect them and save them from accountability rather than actually holding them in accountability, is because that has been the power of white privilege. That has been the access that the white voter has had and has been protected with. And what it is that, you know, we need our white allies and our Black, brown, and indigenous bodies to be able to find ways to be able to overcome some of the hurdles that we have to deal with socioeconomically in life, and find a way to basically civically engage in this process. And we are getting close. I don't want to say that we're getting there, but you know, the fact that we have a POC commission, you know, we have a joint committee on transparent policing and use of force. We have this there. They're trying to have this conversation. If we can encourage a way to be able to be present and push harder with the things that they're currently trying to legislate for us to hopefully protect us, that'd be a
Right.
great start.
But that being said, they're killing us before we get the opportunity to do that. You know?
I can take a minute here, just a second. So one of these things that we need to recognize, whether it's a civilian oversight review board or anything else, is that if they don't have the power to do anything, they're called suggestions. That's a PowerPoint presentation. They don't have to do anything. So there's another point here, is that to protect and serve is a slogan, not a job qualification. So if you want to know something about policing, you need to look where they don't show you. You need to look at what you can't see right there. You look at the 1033 program, and there's your defunding. Look at Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman. Look up Killology. You want to see what they believe? That's what they believe. That's how they have no hesitation to kill you, because that plays into qualified immunity. Qualified immunity is an antiquated, arbitrary, vague law that needs to be abolished. That's what needs to be abolished.
Yep.
Now, I do want to say that the 1033 program, the federal 1033 program, is free money. You can't defund what's free, but yes, making sure that
you
we're
can deny
highlighting
it.
these. Yes, we need to be able to highlight these particular programs as well. This free money that's given to Mayberries to militarize them. Right. And I mean, the smallest of towns with like a cop, a sheriff are getting militarized equipment. You know,
Yeah, let's make this really clear.
The bigger ones get.
That's right. My brother, a veteran, he was on the phone with his VA therapist, and she called to do a well check. They brought in SWAT, put snipers on his roof, and brought in a Bearcat. He was dead 45 minutes later. He didn't have a weapon in his hands. He came to his front door to tell him to get the fuck off his property, because he had every goddamn right to do so. So when you have somebody who's military, knows what their rights are, and you have police being given militarized equipment and weapons and everything else and not have the training, that's when you get the problems that we have. And that's when we get people killed, because they don't know what the hell they're doing and they don't care.
They become Rambo. Yeah, you're right. Absolutely.
I actually, so I don't remember exactly how old I was. I believe I was about 17 or 18 years old when Mary's grandson was killed. And it was right down the street from where I lived in Inglewood. And I remember most of the community organizing happened at our barbershop in the Cut. I remember just participating and kind of listening into like understanding like us trying to break down the community response. And you're talking about in the late 90s, you know, the late 90s when this police force approached this young man fully militarized and took him down without question, you know, as
That was,
instantly and as
excuse
quickly
me,
as they could.
Sima,
Yes.
that
And
was
that
my
start,
cousin.
Your cousin, that's right.
Yes.
Your cousin.
Mhm.
and a lot of the militarization and everything else started with the protests when you were talking about the environmentalists. That's why you're talking about the 90s. So you're talking about ELF and the beginning of this that started here in Eugene and moved up through Portland to Seattle, WTO. So there's a history here, right? There's a history. These cops are learning how to do this, how to attack protesters, the agitators and everything else, the information they're putting out there. I mean, there's arsons, there's arsons out there, and they're claiming that we're doing this.
Mhm.
What the hell? I mean, serious, like why? What? I'm gonna quit with that.
They're alternative.
I'm sorry.
Alternate. That's their motives. They are. It's deflection. It's to try to deflect from them and place the blame somewhere else. Because we are becoming voiceful. We are becoming more involved in what they are doing. So it's a deflection.
And
So
I think
right.
Maria's mic is not working too well right now, but I think she's also signaling that we're out of time.
okay.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
No worries. We had a flow.
And if I can just add one thing, you know, there are federal oversight mechanisms. And in fact, on the 15th, there's going to be a hearing in the House Government Oversight Committee on white supremacists and law enforcement. So look
Good.
for it. And I think that will be an important start to recognize that you do have people that you can go to in the federal government as well.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate your being here. I do want to do that, but I wanted to get that gentleman's name. Was it Michael Horowitz?
Michael Horowitz. Michael Horowitz is the U.S. Department of Justice Inspector General. He has already got an investigation into the U.S. Marshals' conduct during the Portland protests that was requested by U.S. Attorney Billy Williams. So I would urge you to copy the Inspector General on the letter to Billy Williams, and the Justice Department's oversight of Justice Department lawyers is through their Office of Professional Responsibility, which is in Washington, D.C. So if you copy those are the oversight entities for what the U.S. Attorney is doing, and they'll be interested in knowing what the local concerns are.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
No,
Barely, yeah.
I can't hear you.
It's
She's
an honor,
saying
Maria.
thank you, big hearts, and you guys have been fantastic. I am
And jazz hands.
Yeah,
That's
yeah, I'm
nice.
so proud of us. This is great, and we need to keep this conversation going. And I'm hoping that we can do this again. Your guys' information is invaluable, and you know, I think Michael said it, or one of you guys said something fantastic, which is we need to get this information out, and we need to start. Mary said it, and we need to unite and just keep this conversation going and
Yeah.
keep educating people. You guys
Yeah.
are awesome. I love my family.
Oh, and also, just to let everybody know, I got a note saying that to let everybody know, all the listeners know, that we'll get these comments from Mike transcribed as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Love you all.
Love you too.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.